put that thing down, catch our breath, split up the winnings.
Cassian Andor murdered his own informant rather than risk capture. He was ordered to assassinate the father of his teammate. In the shadows of the Star Wars universe, he made choices that most heroes never face. Behind his cold exterior lies one of the most transformative journeys in the galaxy. From a child soldier at age 6 to the spy who helped steal the Death Star plans, Andor's path reveals what the rebellion truly cost its soldiers. In the remote mining world of Kenari, a young boy named Kassa lived among his tribe, surrounded by lush forests that masked the planet's industrial exploitation. Born in 33 BBY as the Republic's power began to wane, Kassa's innocence was short-lived. By age 6, while most children across the galaxy were learning basic skills, he was already fighting for survival as the Clone Wars erupted. The mining disaster on Kenari became the catalyst for his first battle. When a mysterious Republic ship crashed near their settlement, the tribal children, with Kassa among them, ventured to investigate. The dense canopy above gave way to twisted metal and smoke as they approached the wreckage. The rich scent of soil and vegetation mingled with acrid, burning fuel. What should have been an adventure became his first lesson in violence. A confrontation with Republic forces that left bodies on the forest floor. In these same formative years, his father, who opposed Republic militarization, was killed for his protests, not in glorious battle, but in the mundane brutality that characterizes oppression. A child who witnesses such bloodshed develops a different relationship with mortality than those sheltered from such realities. This cascade of losses left him truly vulnerable just as the Republic transformed into the Empire. A political shift that fundamentally altered the galaxy's power dynamics. Salvation came unexpectedly when Marva and Clem Andor discovered him during a salvage operation on Kenari. Recognizing the danger the boy faced, they made the split-second decision to take him with them to Ferrix, an industrial planet far from his homeland. With this rescue came a new identity, Cassian Andor. Though given shelter and a new family, the physical separation from his homeland created a psychological fracture. A boy caught between memories of tribal life and the harsh industrial reality of his new world. The scars of his early trauma remained beneath the surface of his new life. On Ferrix, Cassian witnessed the gradual tightening of Imperial control. The planet's working-class population struggled under increasingly harsh conditions as resources were extracted to feed the Empire's expanding military complex. Daily life became a lesson in systemic injustice. Workers exploited, dissidents disappeared, and communities divided by Imperial tactics of fear and favor. At this critical juncture, rather than developing idealism, Cassian embraced pragmatism. Without formal education or military training, he developed skills that couldn't be taught in academies. How to move undetected, manipulate systems, identify weaknesses in security, and most importantly, how to survive when survival seemed impossible. This street education formed a moral code unlike that of other future rebels. Through this lens, actions couldn't be judged by abstract principles, but by their outcomes. A philosophy that would make him both valuable and dangerous to any resistance movement. The Imperial occupation of Ferrix deepened his understanding of oppression from within. The informant networks, the corporate collaborators, the erosion of community through fear. By his teenage years, Cassian began engaging in small acts of sabotage and theft against Imperial targets, stealing supplies, disrupting communications, gathering intelligence for protection or profit. Thus began his evolution into something rare, a fighter with no illusions about resistance. While many rebels would join driven by idealism, Cassian entered the fight already understanding its darkest requirements. His childhood had taught him that opposing tyranny meant becoming comfortable with deception, violence, and sacrifice. That preserving your humanity sometimes meant compromising it in strategic ways, a luxury the truly oppressed couldn't afford. The compromises Cassian learned to make caught the attention of a man who understood that rebellions aren't won through idealism alone. General Davitz Draven, a hardened veteran of the Clone Wars, recognized in Andor something that many rebel leaders preferred to ignore: that defeating tyranny required individuals willing to commit acts that official Alliance histories would never acknowledge. Draven's recruitment of Cassian was acquiring an operative designed for the rebellion's darkest corners. Under Draven's guidance, Cassian received a captain's commission in Rebel Intelligence, a title that belied his true function. While Alliance propaganda celebrated X-Wing pilots and diplomatic efforts, Cassian operated without fanfare or recognition. His assignments existed in the negative space of the rebellion: missions that couldn't be documented, operations that leadership needed plausible deniability about. This shadow existence required Cassian to develop extensive networks of informants across Imperial space. These contacts formed a fragile web of resistance, people who trusted him with their lives. During a mission on Corda Prime, his carefully cultivated network of dock workers provided critical intelligence on Imperial weapon shipments that prevented an Alliance outpost's destruction. Yet the cruel arithmetic of rebellion sometimes required him to abandon these very people when operations went wrong, each sacrifice adding another layer to his complex relationship with the cause. What made Cassian invaluable was his capacity to operate independently. General Draven described him as one of the most capable agents within Rebel Intelligence, noting his ability to analyze intelligence and make field decisions without oversight. This independence meant Cassian bore the psychological burden of his choices alone, without the comfort of shared responsibility. His undercover operations required physical courage and the mental fortitude to maintain complete separation between his actual self and cover identities. One moment of genuine emotion breaking through his facade could mean death for him, his contacts, and the operations they supported. Cassian's technical ingenuity manifested in his acquisition and reprogramming of K2SO, an Imperial security droid. This decision reflected his evolution, recognizing that victory required more than destruction. It demanded adaptability and resourcefulness. K2SO eventually became more than a tactical asset, serving as Cassian's most consistent companion in a life defined by solitude and secrecy. The moral weight of his activities created tension within Alliance leadership. While General Draven valued his versatility in assignments from reconnaissance to assassination, leaders like Mon Mothma recognized the psychological toll such work exacted. She expressed concern about the burden carried by operatives like Andor, acknowledging the cost of choices made in the rebellion's name. The incident at the Ring of Kafrene crystallized his cold calculations. When confronted with an informant who couldn't escape an Imperial patrol, Cassian made the brutal decision to kill the man rather than risk his capture. As he watched the informant's body fall, something inside him hardened further. Another piece of himself sacrificed for the cause he couldn't abandon, despite the growing weight of such moments. His focus on gathering intelligence about Imperial weapons development, particularly tracking Kyber crystal shipments, represented the unglamorous yet essential work that enabled the Alliance to anticipate threats. As missions accumulated, Cassian became the embodiment of the rebellion's necessary contradictions, fighting for freedom through methods that sometimes mimicked the enemy's brutality, championing justice while operating outside its constraints. His existence represented the uncomfortable truth that challenging a tyrannical empire required individuals willing to sacrifice not just their lives, but pieces of their humanity. The calculus of necessary evil that guided Cassian's operations suddenly collapsed when confronted with the Death Star's devastating reality. Intelligence gathering and assassination were familiar territories for him, but the mission to Jedha alongside Jyn Erso would force him to measure his small moral compromises against a weapon capable of planetary annihilation. What began as a straightforward operation, locate Saw Gerrera and extract information about the Empire's superweapon, quickly evolved into something far more complex. Before leaving, General Draven had pulled Cassian aside with orders that contradicted his public mission briefing. The command was explicit: Galen Erso is vital to the Empire's weapons program. Forget what you heard in there. There will be no extraction. You find him. You kill him. Then and there. With these words, Cassian found himself caught between conflicting directives, creating tension with Jyn, who believed her father could be saved. Jeddah City revealed a resistance woven into daily life under Imperial occupation. Everywhere Cassian looked, ordinary citizens fought back in their own ways, street vendors passing intelligence between sales, children creating diversions, families sheltering fugitives within plain sight. These weren't operatives trained for war, but people preserving their dignity against overwhelming odds, through countless small acts that suddenly seemed desperately fragile against the rumors of the Empire's new weapon. In Chiridimwe and Baze Malbus, Cassian encountered something rare: faith as resistance. While Cassian operated through pragmatic compromises, Chirrut moved with unwavering spiritual conviction. "I am one with the Force, and the Force is with me," he would chant, navigating through danger despite his blindness. Baze, though cynical, demonstrated loyalty transcending political allegiances. Their dedication to principles larger than themselves challenged Cassian's operational mindset. Then came the moment that redefined everything. The Death Star appeared in Jeddah's atmosphere, not as an abstract threat or rumor, but terrifying reality. When its super laser struck the holy city, the devastation was absolute. The ground shook with terrible force. Heat seared the air as structures disintegrated. The roar of collapsing buildings blended with screams suddenly silenced. An entire city, its history, culture, and thousands of lives vanished in seconds. As their ship barely escaped, Cassian watched the shockwave consuming the planet's surface. The enormity of the destruction made his careful moral calculations seem meaningless. What value did eliminating informants have against a weapon that erased worlds? Every compromise he'd made, every line he'd crossed, all seemed trivial and futile when facing such overwhelming destructive power. After escaping, Cassian reported through encrypted channels. Weapon confirmed. Jeddah destroyed. Mission target located on Edu, please advise. His superiors responded with urgency, instructing him to proceed immediately. On rain-soaked Edu, Cassian positioned himself overlooking the Imperial facility. Through his sniper scope, he located Galen Erso. His finger hovered over the trigger, a position he'd been in countless times before. Yet the images of Jeddah's destruction flashed in his mind alongside Jyn's conviction in her father's innocence. Each assassination he'd carried out had been justified as necessary for the greater good, but after witnessing planetary annihilation, the cost to his humanity seemed suddenly unbearable. Cassian lowered his weapon. He couldn't pull the trigger. This represented a fundamental shift in his understanding of his role in the rebellion. The decision proved consequential, but ultimately moot. Moments later, rebel X-Wings bombarded the facility. Galen died anyway, but Cassian's choice not to be his executioner marked a turning point. His priorities were transforming from survival and following orders to risking everything for something greater than himself. Standing before the Rebel Alliance Council, Jyn Erso's impassioned plea for action against the Imperial facility on Scarif fell on deaf ears. As fear and resignation spread through the leadership, Cassian Andor witnessed something that challenged everything he'd come to accept about the rebellion. The very organization he'd sacrificed his moral clarity for was now paralyzed when faced with its moment of truth. In that pivotal moment, the spy who had operated in darkness for decades made an unprecedented choice: to step into the light and lead. The Alliance Council's paralysis triggered something profound within Cassian. The man who once killed his own informant to protect the cause now prepared to defy that cause's direct orders. Years of compromise and moral ambiguity crystallized into clarity. The intelligence operative who had manipulated others for the greater good found himself in unfamiliar territory. inspiring volunteers for what was effectively a suicide mission. "I've been in this fight since I was 6 years old," he told the gathered rebels, his voice carrying a conviction that transformed him into a leader. In his mind, those years of sacrifice suddenly gained new meaning, not as wasted time serving a faltering institution, but as preparation for this defining moment. His words were raw truth. For perhaps the first time, Cassian's most effective weapon was his authentic self. The speech galvanized a small force willing to follow him and Jin, despite minimal chances of survival. His transformation mirrored his evolving relationship with Jin. Where once he saw her as an asset to manage, they had forged a genuine partnership through shared purpose and mutual respect. They embodied complementary forces, her passionate idealism balanced by his strategic pragmatism, crucial as they prepared for their unsanctioned mission. On Scarif, Cassian emerged from the shadows of covert operations into the light of direct leadership. The man who once operated alone now commanded troops with authority, deploying their limited resources with tactical brilliance honed through countless missions. He entrusted Sergeant Melshi with ground forces while leading the specialized infiltration team himself. Inside the Imperial facility, Cassian moved with the confidence of someone who had found his true purpose. No longer simply following orders or protocols, he made critical decisions that inspired others to follow, adapting to changing circumstances not just for mission success, but for a cause he fully believed in. K2SO's sacrifice marked the emotional crucible of his transformation. The reprogrammed droid had been Cassian's closest companion through years of isolation. This loss penetrated the emotional barriers he'd built, revealing the humanity he had fought to preserve beneath his hardened exterior. Despite being severely wounded by Krennic's blaster, Cassian persevered. Dragging himself up the data tower to support Jin demonstrated a commitment beyond calculation or self-preservation. The calculating operative had become a man who found something worth dying for. The final scene on Scarif's beach completed his journey. As the Death Star's destructive beam approached, he and Jin faced their end with quiet acceptance. The shadows that had defined his existence gave way to clarity and purpose. The child fighting merely to survive had become a man willingly sacrificing himself for something greater. Cassian Andor's transformation emerged organically from accumulated experiences and moral reckonings. The man who believed ends justified means had discovered something more important than victory: the integrity of the fight itself. The ripples of Cassian Andor's sacrifice extended far beyond the beaches of Scarif. His final mission directly enabled the rebellion's greatest victory: the destruction of the Death Star. The plans he and Rogue One secured revealed the thermal exhaust port vulnerability that Luke Skywalker would later exploit at the Battle of Yavin. His legacy exists in absence, in billions who lived because a planet killer was destroyed. Andor's journey embodies the uncomfortable truth about revolution. Freedom requires those willing to operate in moral shadows. His transformation represents a flame ignited amid darkness. In the end, Cassian teaches us rebellion's true strength: transformed hearts. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and push the notification button.